By now, you know the Underground Railroad was more than white people hiding black slaves running for freedom. Our stories challenge the idea that blacks could not take care of themselves. In fact, they were a brave, strong, resourceful, and powerful community. Today we meet Perry Simmons, a self-emancipated black man who was supported by his free black community of Timbuctoo in fighting back. Our story is The Bold Defenders of Timbuctoo.
The dark of night finds you wide awake. Branches rustle in the winter winds, and shadows in the woods take on a lifelike motion. Moonlight shimmers off the trickling brook running through your yard. You startle and tense at the crackle of leaves. A passing raccoon? Or something much more sinister. The catchers are about. You check the caps on your shotgun yet again and lay it back across your lap. You shift the armchair a little closer to the window. You're not going back. Just outside of Mount Holly, on the way to the Lenape Reservation on Rancocas Road, one passes the remains of a thriving, though never large, community of color. Referred to often as just Bucktoo by locals, Timbuctoo took its name from the African city in Mali. That city was home to a bustling caravan economy and a world-renowned university. All this during the Middle Ages in Europe. Our Timbuctoo, however, is located within the modern bounds of Westhampton Township in New Jersey's Burlington County. Though there remains significant scholarly discourse regarding when this community was founded, it was certainly in place during most of the early part of the 19th century. It served as an extended family for many free blacks and mulattoes, as well as a few self-emancipated former slaves. This latter group tended to stay only briefly and then moved on to safer homesteads in New York or Canada. Some, however, found the place inviting and adequate to meet their needs in raising a family. Perry Simmons was one such man. Perry had been in Bucktoo for 10 to 12 years, according to some, living in a tenant house belonging to Alan Fenimore. He was relatively well respected in the area and lived with his wife, 17-year-old son, 21-year-old daughter, and 2 small children. The primary means of sustenance was day labor, tenant farming, and trade work for the many farms and businesses in the region. Small family plots also provide fresh vegetables, and most people had a few chickens or goats. It is most probable that in performing some day labor, Perry caught the eye of a slave catcher or his agent. You see, Perry had been audacious enough to emancipate himself and his family from a slaveholder down south. According to the Fugitive Slave Act of 1853, Perry was a criminal, liable to be returned to his master under federal law for stealing himself. Often a bounty of $20 to $50 was offered for the return of a slave. In 1860, that was 6 months' salary. Posters were issued and newspaper ads circulated nationally, expressly for the purpose of returning self-emancipators to their masters. The Mount Holly region was relatively safe, owing to the large number of Quakers residing there. Still, there were enough entrepreneurs who coveted the bounty for each returned slave to make life dangerous. In Bucktoo, there was hope through safety in numbers. With Abraham Lincoln's recent election foreshadowing a bloody civil war, George Alberti arrived from Philadelphia in December of 1860. He acquired the services of the sheriff and a few locals looking for a hot time. The raiding party consisted of Alberti, a black former resident, Caleb Wright, and 6 to 8 others, some coming from Philadelphia via Camden. Perry was waiting, but uncertain of the willingness of his neighbors to risk arrest and jail for helping him, an escaped slave. Locals recall this encounter as the Battle in the Swamp. It took place near Timbuctoo in December of 1860. The community of Timbuctoo straddled portions of what is now Rancocas Road, and went as far south as Rancocas Creek. The battleground could have been at any point in this area, which is swampy and full of streams and marshlands. It's very easy to defend, and difficult to locate someone who wishes to remain hidden. Overwhelmed, Perry ran into the attic, awaiting his inevitable fate. To his surprise and delight, however, his neighbors came out in support. The community respected this resident and came to his aid, firing muskets and pistols in return to the fighting of the bounty hunters. Henry Shin relates that several people were injured, though not much factual evidence exists about this engagement. Mr. Simmons stayed in his attic all night, but was never captured. It is also related that this was one of 2 failed attempts to capture Perry and put him back into slavery. We have the following reference from the New Jersey Mirror newspaper from February the 13th, 1862. Perry Simmons, the colored man, whose attempted arrest as a fugitive slave on 2 occasions created considerable excitement in our neighborhood, died in Timbuctoo a week or 2 ago. Perry had not been well since the last attempt to capture him, in consequence of taking a severe cold on that freezing night. It will be recollected that he was forced to fly suddenly from his bedroom to the garret, where he was obliged to remain until morning, suffering severely from the cold. Perry is at last beyond the reach of his Southern master. New Jersey is often noted for having voted against Abraham Lincoln in both of his bids for the presidency, and industrial economic interests held Southern sympathies. But on that cold night in 1860, residents stood together in a bold defense of a place called Timbuctoo.
And now Kristen Plumley will help us to find Timbuctoo on our map. Kristen, over to you.
Good morning. Here is my travel size map of New Jersey. For reference, we have Trenton here, capital, and up here is Ridgewood. I'm taking our marker and finding Timbuctoo, which is just southeast of Trenton. And there we have Timbuctoo, our 4th stop on the Underground Railroad.